Namaskar, Nileshok here. Welcome back to the course on Introduction to Indian Calendar. In this module, we are going to discuss something that we have not discussed in this course so far. This has to do with the relative position and relative distance between the Earth and the Sun, or between the Earth and the Moon. This essentially has effect on the Indian lunisolar calendar. In fact, we already discussed some of these effects. For example, the occurrence of Adhika Tithi, Adhika Nakshatra, and also the occurrence of Kshaya Tithi and Kshaya Nakshatra. We will also see the implication of this phenomenon in how a Adhika Masa or a intercalary lunar month, how it is selected, how it is inserted, or the methodology to insert intercalary month or Adhika Masa into India's lunisolar calendar. So let's begin with the relative positions of the Sun and the Earth. Although typically we show the orbit of the Sun around the Earth, or Earth's orbit around the Sun, as perfectly circular orbit, in reality that is not the case. If you are familiar with the conics, different shapes which are similar to but not identical with the circle, perfect circle, one of the shape you would be familiar with is called ellipse. That is essentially how it would look like. So think of this as a elongated or extended circle. What is shown here is deliberately exaggerated view of the reality. In this module or in another module, we will actually look at the relative positions. They are not that exaggerated. However, this exaggeration, deliberate one, really helps to explain the point and for a new student of astronomy to comprehend this point. So imagine Sun is at the center, but it's no longer the center of a circle, but it is at the center of an ellipse. And what happens in case of an ellipse is as if it has two centers. An ellipse has as if two center points. An individual center point is called focus. So thus it has two of them. And as a plural, it's called foci. And in this system of the Sun at the center of an ellipse surrounded by this orbit of the Earth, we can imagine, because that's what the reality is, as a good approximation, that the Sun is at one of the foci of the ellipse. And that's why it's kind of off-center if you think of it. In fact, both the foci are off-center. But so what happens because of this? As the Earth goes around the Sun, when this Earth is relatively speaking closer to the Sun, it is called the point of Perihelion. Now people will pronounce it in 10 different ways. So you get used to those, but it's like Perihelion. And the other one, when Earth is farthest from the Sun, is called aphelion, aphelion, and sometimes I deliberately split that as a aphelion, helio in the sense of the sun. And as a mnemonics, I will mention that the way I remember is that A in the aphelion is that away. So when the earth is at the aphelion, I remember it that A away, and that means earth is the at a farthest distance from the sun. Now, before I discuss the implications of this, let me also go ahead and show you the similar positions for the moon. What is shown here is, now think of it, earth is at the center, and imagine an artificial satellite is going around it. Again, this has to go back to the Newton's law, and we will not go into the details. We'll take this on a leap of a shraddha. I want you to take it on a leap of a shraddha that the typical path will always be elliptical. And we'll not get into technicalities, such as if you put the eccentricity value for the ellipse equal to 0, then essentially it becomes a circle. Okay, so this picture again is exaggerated, and it is done for a reason, so that it becomes very easy to comprehend. So suppose if there is artificial satellite going around the earth, it will reach a point where it is closest to the earth, so to say, and that's called perigee. And when it's farthest, again, remember that letter A, it's called apogee. And then you will hear many different ways all of these words are pronounced. Now let's replace that artificial satellite with the moon. Again, we have the same scenario. Now, moon is not an artificial satellite. You can think of this as a natural satellite. But again, there is a point during the orbit of the moon around the earth. It will be at certain point closest to the earth, and at another point it will be farthest from the earth. So perigee, apogee, and again remember that letter A meaning away, farthest distance from the central body. It could be sun, it could be earth. After this, again remember, when we are going to discuss the motion of one celestial body around another, we will interchangeably go from earth going around the sun to sun going around the earth. And we will do the same thing for moon going around the earth. And sometimes we're saying earth going around the moon. Remember, it depends on who is watching, what is our reference frame, and just for a practical purposes, we might use this language interchangeably because we are making these observations from the earth. All right. Now, what are the implications of these? Very interesting. Let's go back to the sun and the earth system. So when the earth comes closer to the sun, that is at the point of perihelion, what you will notice is that you will feel as if you are going faster, or sun is moving faster, in the sense of the angular distance covered by the sun as seen from the earth will appear as if it's going faster through that angular distance of 360 degrees. On the other hand, when the position of the earth with respect to the sun is at the aphelion, away, farthest from the sun, as seen from the earth, the sun would appear that it is moving in that angular distance slower in comparison to at other times. In the Indian astronomy, these points are also known as Mandoscha and Shigrocha. So Manda meaning slow, and Ucha meaning the farthest or the closest. So the Mandocha is a point where the sun would be seen as going the slowest as seen from the earth, so which is essentially the point of aphelion. The Shigrocha is the point of perihelion, where from the earth the sun would appear to go faster, or rather fastest, through this angular distance. Now let us take that same concept for the moon. At the perigee, as seen from the earth, the moon would appear to go faster. And at the apogee, as seen from the earth, moon would appear to go slower. Now, important to remember, again, without going into too much detail in order to avoid making it complicated, that this point of aphelion, perihelion in the case of sun and earth system, or the points of perigee and apogee in case of the moon and the earth system, these points actually move, okay? And they move with respect to different parameters. For example, the point of the aphelion or perihelion, which is to say the points with respect to the sun and earth system, they do move, but not a lot. However, whether they move it or not, remember the cardinal points are indeed moving. The vernal equinox, the fall equinox, the summer solstice, winter solstice, these points are moving, and therefore it may have different implications. In case of the Earth and Moon system, the situation is much more dynamic. These points are changing, then Moon is changing its position, especially the full moon keeps on changing its position throughout the year. And over a long period of time, we are going to get a lot more complex phenomenon, which has to do with the change in the perigee, apogee of the moon. There are many additional gravitational forces that may have influence. Add to it the effects due to the changes in the aphelion and perihelion positions of the sun, or of the sun and earth system, and the changes in the cardinal points. It may look complicated, and that's why I said I just want to introduce you to this concept, but do keep this in mind. And if you need to come back to this module, do come back. In addition, you can always go to Google, Wikipedia, and type these words: aphelion, perihelion, perigee, apogee. Try to understand what that means. Try to look at some videos from the YouTube if the concept is not clear. Do whatever it takes so that you are comfortable with these concepts. And what we just discussed has significant effect on some of the things that happen in the Indian lunisolar calendar, specifically Adhika Tithi, Adhika Nakshatra, Kshaya Tithi, Kshaya Nakshatra, and the Adhika Masa, or intercalary month, the intercalary lunar month, and the methodology that is employed for the insertion of this intercalary lunar month in the Indian lunisolar system.